Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining today. We're going to start the webinar in just a few moments. We're going to let some more attendees dial in, so thank you for your patience. Hi again, everyone. We're going to start in just a couple minutes. We see some more people are still dialing in, so we thank you again for your patience, and we'll get started shortly. We're just going to give it another minute. I still see some people dialing in, so we'll just give another minute and then we will get underway. Thank you. Right, I'm going to turn it over. We're going to get started here. And I'm going to turn it over to our moderator to get the webinar started today. Thanks for everyone who's joined.
Hi there. I'm Sandy Brecker, Chief of Commuter Services for the Montgomery County Department of Transportation. And we're very glad that you can join us today in these very challenging times. We have a very interesting couple of presenters today. I want to note that the session is being recorded and it will be available on our website. We will be accepting questions during the presentation. There's a chat box that you can enter your questions in, and we did get a couple of them in advance as well that we'll be addressing. So we will be doing that at the end of the two presentations. So as you're hearing the presentations, please do enter your questions. And if it's for a specific presenter, we have two today, then you can note that as well. Also, I want to note that we will have some follow-up opportunities, so please stay tuned to the end. We'll have a survey that we'll be asking you to complete to get some feedback on this. So if you have notes you want to make along the way about that, that would be great. And if you need additional assistance, we will have some information available about how to obtain that additional assistance and an additional webinar that we'll be holding next week. So we are certainly living in challenging times. There are plenty of negatives right now, but we're hoping with this webinar that we can focus on some of the positives and look at this as an opportunity for some hands-on learning to position all of ourselves as, in better position to work both this way and ongoing in the future. And of course, telework helps with other issues as well as emergency operations issues. It helps with recruitment and retention. We all know helps employees balance work and family and can save money over the long run, which is something undoubtedly many of us are going to be looking to do once we get through this, this challenge. So with that, I will turn the program over to our first presenter, Elham Shirazi. Elham has many years of experience as president of ePlanning. They are a nationally recognized expert on management of telework, and she has developed many resource materials and conducted a lot of workshops. Her bio in greater detail was available on the invite. So without further ado, Elham, take it away.
Thank you, Sandy, and good afternoon, everybody. So what we're going to be talking about first are, given the unprecedented situation that we've been placed in, we're going to be talking about how to be a manager in this environment. We know that you come probably from a variety of backgrounds in terms of your experience with teleworking. Some of you may have had teleworkers in the past. For some of you, this may be, something new that you're doing. So we're hoping that through this presentation, we at least level, the experience equally amongst all. Typically, when teleworking is implemented, management is concerned about the bottom line, and these are some of the reasons that in normal times would probably cause the adoption of a teleworking program. As you can see, some of the reasons listed are to improve productivity. Something in the range of 10 to 20% seems to be the norm if a program is well developed and employees are selected appropriately, the technology works. We also in the past few years have seen a lot of employers implement teleworking because of recruitment and retention issues. And obviously tied to that is morale. Some organizations go down this path to reduce overhead and maybe have some desk sharing or some desk hopping even occurring, so that not everybody might be in the office at the same time. Sustainability, improving coverage, decreasing absenteeism and tardiness, and also congestion are some very important reasons. And tied with all of this is the opportunity to prepare for business continuity. In today's situation, that sales process of getting management on board has kind of been compressed to the fact that a lot of your organizations are probably offering this. And the manager's role in this environment is probably one that can maximize productivity of staff given the limitations of, what you have technologically, the existing level of trust in the workplace, the relationships that are there, the communication strategies, but balancing all this with external elements, such as employees having to deal with kids at home or dependents, maybe even having to take care of sick family or friends, and maybe not also having had, for employees not having had the time to select a dedicated location for teleworking, which is often part and parcel of successful teleworking. And some of them may not even have the space to have a separate maybe room or a separate part of their home that they can dedicate to this. In the context of teleworking, what we have found to be really helpful for managers is to help employees set up, through some scheduled meetings by phone or video. Video would be really great if you have it right now, to talk with the employee about maybe what expectations there are for the first week of teleworking or whatever week you're on, and helping the employees come up with objectives and deliverables, and also some time frames as to how their scope of work can be accomplished. It would be good to ask the employee to possibly send in a list of maybe what they're hoping to accomplish for that first week. Review it, and make sure that you both understood the same message, and then at the end of the week, go over that list with the employees to see what did they accomplish, what couldn't they accomplish, and help coach them, and make lists of what as managers you have to do to maybe improve employees' productivities, and maybe tied to technology. And hopefully by doing this every week and repeating it at the beginning of the week and ending it at the end of the week with a discussion, that teleworking becomes much more natural for your employees who may have had no experience in doing this before. And it also helps you as a manager to be stronger in being goal-oriented and deliverable-oriented, because managing by presence is not going to be there. You may already have to adopt a different style of management when you're dealing with different employees. With some of them, you may be providing a lot of direction, and that's the nature of your relationship. It could be that the employee is newer, or the employee just needs more direction. With some, you may be providing some level of direction and coaching them so they're a little bit more independent. With some other employees, you may be advising, meaning the goals are clear, and you may just be adding some tips and giving them some ideas of how to accomplish it. And with some employees, you may have a relationship where you can delegate, which means that you probably can say one sentence and the employee knows exactly what it takes to complete their assignment. That relationship is not going to change as a result of teleworking. So keep that in mind as you are talking with your employees and giving them guidelines on how they should be setting their work up. This is just a simple task schedule. If the employees ask for a guideline as to how you want them to identify what they're going to be working on, this might help, whereby they identify the task, they identify the deliverable, and then if you want, at the end of the week, they're providing results on what was accomplished. It's good to do this by video, maybe if you have it available, so initially you can see body language, and it also gives a chance for the employee to break their day and not get isolated because they've been working at home for many days in a row. Establishing communication strategies are important. You want to think through how will teleworking change communications, and look at how you as a manager communicate. Do you send emails? Do you walk down the hall and give instructions? Do you send a text message or chat? And think about how this may have to change while people are not there with you physically. And I mean, obviously, we are going to rely a lot more upon calling each other, emailing each other. And if there are questions, there's nothing wrong with interrupting someone, meaning that do take the time to phone, do take the time to email, because that's part of what should happen in a telework environment. However, given that some employees' schedules may be a little bit different because of their childcare needs, it could take them a little bit of time to get back to you. But all of this will settle as we go, through a few more weeks of having to be in work at home mode. In terms of impromptu communications, we want to make sure that they don't go away. So if you are talking with an employee, or you're going over a great concept, it's good to pause and think in the environment of teleworking as to, okay, how do we get others involved, so that as opposed to just doing it with one employee, you can maybe do a virtual chat with a few others, or just send an email and see if everyone can meet in 5 minutes to talk about the concept. So we want that brainstorming to still be occurring. The other thing to consider as part of your discussion with the employees is an understanding of when are the best hours for employees, maybe to start in this context and when to end. And it might be that you're looking at a different schedule because of household needs interfering with this process, but also try to assess if there can be core hours, meaning that maybe there's a 2-3 hour span of time that everybody is available during that time, so that some of the teamwork will be occurring in those hours. As far as teleworkers, it's good to spell out accessibility and availability. Obviously, you want to make sure that you have their numbers, their phone numbers, all the appropriate contact information. But also, it's good for employees to have an idea of when they should be accessible. And it could be that you send them a message and they can't return it in a timely manner because they're on a conference call. But obviously, a lot of those things have to be scheduled and have to be on somebody's calendar, so that we know when might be a better time to communicate. In fact, your Outlook calendars, your electronic calendars should be updated to not only include work meetings, but also to include personal non-available time. And what I mean by that is that there are couples, partners who are sharing in childcare duties, and it might be that somebody's not available between 9 and 11 because that's when they have to be taking care of the kids, and then in the afternoon they're fully available because the other partner is taking care of the children. A few other communication tips. I think I've covered some of this, but don't forget about the impact of FaceTime in this relationship to the degree possible, and when employees are comfortable. Do try to have video meetings, and sometimes in this environment, not in a typical telework environment where, we have delineation between work and our personal lives, things would be different. But in this environment, you might even meet some of their family members, or somebody might come in and, bring them a sandwich. And it's good to be a little bit more personal, because everybody, is probably a little bit stressed out by this ongoing, isolation that's happening for a lot of families and individuals. We can move to the next slide, please. There should be clear direction from management on when attendance is necessary for any meetings, whether they're by phone or they're virtual, or there's a video. So if you want all hands on deck, please be very clear so that people can manage to, free themselves up at that time. But given that you're not sitting around a table, you want to make sure that the meetings run very organized. So there should be a lead for every meeting with an agenda, clear topics, so that the meetings go smoothly. A lot of people have found that having, 15-minute team huddles or virtual breaks really are helpful to people who are working at home. And so they don't have to be long meetings. It could be about a topic, or it could just be a virtual break, as I mentioned, so people can talk about personal things. Working alone for days without interaction can be difficult, especially on employees who live alone. And, you do want to make sure that you have communications with those employees, and you're also making sure that they're not overworking, because that could be typical, especially in contexts where people are alone. They may just work and work, and that will not be good either, because it can cause burnout. Your teleworkers should be trained on collaborative technologies. If they aren't, please take the time to send them tutorials or get them some training so that they know how to use these tools. Not everybody can learn on their own sometimes. A few other, just general tips. Some organizations are doing virtual coffee breaks, meaning that, yes, I know, as silly as it sounds, but employees come to the meeting with, a mug, and, there's a video on, and there, so it's just a coffee break. And also, it's important that as managers, we build trust so that teleworkers are comfortable coming to you with, their work problems and involving you in those solutions. Obviously, we're talking about work problems that they may be encountering. A few, other things to consider. Again, these are some difficult times. It's not bad to, once in a while send just weekly nice messages about morale and about, being optimistic about the future. Make sure your employees have work-life balance, as I mentioned in the previous slide, and obviously that you're involved in problem solving. Now, some of you may have a policy for your program, and some of you may not. So this is a good time to sit back and think about what are some guidelines that are needed, or some policy language that's needed. And there are some samples of materials on the Montgomery County Commuter's website that Sandy will refer to again. It's important to have goals for the program. One of the goals right now would be to provide business continuity during COVID-19, until further notice, because we don't know when that deadline is. To be specific about selection criteria, and usually this is a discussion of what would be appropriate in terms of individuals and what kind of jobs can be done remotely. what are the arrangements, that are available, and going into the future, of course, this would be, is this going to be full-time or part-time? Is there flexibility? There should be the communication, some language around communication needs, and making sure that employees set up a safe workspace, because workers' comp does apply to the home when employees are working at home. And if an accident happens that is job related during the agreed upon hours and in the designated work area, not the entire house, that it could be legitimate. You want to also have guidelines around technology, which I know Drew will talk about later. And also the insurance. Typically, if the employee is providing the equipment, the employee is responsible for the insurance and upkeep, and vice versa. If the employer is providing it, then the employer is responsible. This is a form that is a lot of times used to tailor the arrangement to every individual employee. So as you can see, there are fill-in sections. I think the date, the location is very important, so you know where they're teleworking from. This is their home address. The dates should be, from the moment you told them to go into work at home, probably for the purposes of COVID-19, and maybe have a date there for when this will be reassessed, so that people are managing their expectations. And then it's a good idea to have some core hours there, types of assignments, some general communication milestones. I think a sample of this form is also available on the website. If not, ask us and we'll make it available. There are some legalities to consider. You want to make sure that for your non-exempt employees, that you can still record their hours in a manner, in terms of timesheets. And you also want to make sure that in a week's time, they don't go over 40 hours without checking your overtime policies, which are the same as they would be in the office. Workers' comp I talked about. OSHA does not have any rules around the employers being responsible for the employee's workspace. However, most employees do reserve the right to visit the workspace. We're not going to do this now, but in a general setting you would, or you would at least reserve the right to go and look at the work site, just to assess whether or not it's ergonomic. Supervisors are not supposed to go to employees' homes under any context. This would be something done from your risk assessment side. ADA does not have any requirements that teleworking has to be an accommodation, and nor does family and medical leave, although under both there are situations which may lend to teleworking. And you also want to make sure that if you do adopt teleworking, that you don't use language such as this is a privilege or this is a benefit, because then we're creating expectations that some people may say, well, how come everybody doesn't get to telework? So we want to make sure that our language is not discriminatory. The good news is, for 30, 40 years of teleworking, none of these have been a showstopper. But we do want to advise you to talk with your attorneys on these issues, please. So the future of work at home after COVID-19, take really good notes. We should be planning now. As I mentioned, it's important to manage expectations. The technology should be getting more and more robust, hopefully. For some of you who went from no remote connection to providing some form of remote connection, and I'm sure we're going to see more virtual collaboration in the future. We'll probably even see more, a day a week of teleworking, 2 days a week. But keep in mind, not everybody likes teleworking, and not everybody wants to work at home. And another way to kind of equalize the availability of programs is maybe in the future consider having alternative work hours or having a 10-hour type of a week, maybe so employees get 3 days off during the week. Not everybody's going to be suitable for teleworking. And a few things you should track. Please do track productivity. Please do track technology issues so you're getting solutions. It's good to get an idea of, if employees like teleworking, if they don't, what are some, downsides to it, what are some upsides, get an idea of overall satisfaction. And obviously, we want to learn, a lot of lessons now so that when we come back to a good norm, whatever that may be, that we can incorporate teleworking in an efficient manner in the workplace. This is a list of consulting that is available through Montgomery County Commuter Services. So basically, we can help you through every step of program implementation, and you get phone numbers and emails to contact us at the end of the presentation. So at this point, I am going to turn it over to Drew to talk about technology.
All right, thank you, Elham. And I just want to quickly say congratulations to everyone out there who's now trying teleworking for the first time. I know that we got thrown into this kind of quickly, and your home setup may not be, since we haven't had a lot of time to prepare, may not be optimized. And I think I can safely say that most people across the country, we're all in the same boat, and we're all in this together, and we will get through it together. But now is really a pretty exciting time from a technology perspective, to start telework because of the technology that's available. As Elham said, it does continue to get better, connectivity and so on and so forth. So with that, I think what I'm going to try to go through today is a few strategies that might help you out as you're implementing telework and looking at the technologies that you would use to support it. So here, what I really am trying to share with you is that technology has evolved quite a bit, and we're coming from environments where, not long ago we really did, have to work from the office. That's where our computers were. It's where our phones were. Our communication was pretty basic, whether it was meetings or telephone. And as Elham said, outside of the office, connectivity wasn't really something that we thought too much about. But we're now in an environment that really supports telework. Cloud technology is available. Many applications run in the cloud. We have multiple forms of communication, whether it's a voice conference or video or instant messaging. Many options to stay informed and stay connected, and also a connectivity abundance. So we're lucky to live in the United States, where a lot of places do have high-speed internet at the home. So as we think about that sets us up pretty nicely to migrate to a work from home or a telework program. But there's a lot of considerations, just because the technology's there, with regard to the setup and how you think this through, what's most effective for you. So, on this slide, what I wanted to share with you is maybe a few strategies to start thinking about when you want to apply technology so that it will help you with your program. And the first one is really, I think, what a lot of people start out with is thinking about how do I apply some technology so that I can keep my employees, so that I could set them up to work from home, so I can give them the tools that they need to be successful, whether that's some hardware that they need. If it's a laptop, if they have a laptop today, can they easily bring it home? Do they have an internet connection? Who needs a printer? Those types of things. So thinking through what it is that your employees will need so that when they are at home, they'll be able to do their jobs. And then also the second bullet, looking at technology to eliminate travel because of some of the restrictions that are in place across the United States, really trying to do as much as you can without travel. We're going to look for ways to leverage technology to do that. A lot of times it'll be like what we're doing today with a broadcast webinar. And if your organization is one that has to do things like that, who has to provide training, you know, broadcast webinars are a real good way to go. And the last item, technology to remotely support customers, you know, it's good to give some thought as to how you'll get comfortable with technology in order to provide support to your customers. They are the reason that we're in business, you know, and think things through as far as how customers are going to reach you, what's the best way for you to respond them, how to divvy up those things between, you know, your workers, and whether that's having, if you have a toll-free number, if it can be rerouted to another place so that you know that the call will get coverage. If you're the type of organization that provides support like a help desk, can those agents be relocated so that they can work from home and use the same phone answering type capabilities from home? So what we find, you know, generally, we talked a little bit about some of the things that are needed to work from home, and aside from the actual hardware, like the computers, there's applications that support telework as well. And what we find is the three most common ones are really file sharing, business software, and collaboration. And you know, with file sharing, we're really looking for ways to provide access to the files that people need so that they can do their jobs. And business software, looking at ways that if you have an application that you use in the office, you know, can you have access to that application when you're remote? And then lastly, collaboration, obviously without being in the office, what are those mechanisms? How are we going to be able to work together while we're all separated? So here, I wanted to give you some examples of what these applications might look like. So what I drew on was really some of the ones that I thought were more common, but you'll see in the title of the slide, popular cloud-based applications. And the key here is really cloud-based, and another term for that is SaaS, or software as a service. And the concept here being that applications today, many of them are available in a SaaS type format, which means they're available through the internet. And they're available basically anywhere, anytime. And so that being said, if you're using a tool, business software such as Salesforce, which is a customer relationship management tool, if you're able to access that in the office, you should still be able to access it at home. It's really more of a matter of making sure you have the right amount of subscriptions or the right amount of licenses so that everybody who needs access to it can get it. Another good example is Intuit, that provides financial applications. Many of the smaller businesses that we see use QuickBooks Online, and that's another good example of an application that works well in the office, but also can work remotely. And as long as you have access to the application, the types of things that you're trying to figure out is really, you know, if you are using QuickBooks, if there's a person who does your invoicing and you still use paper invoices to send to your customers, does that person need to bring home a printer, or how is that function going to work? And then with file sharing, as I mentioned before, really just ways to provide access to the files that you need to do your job. There's a lot to be said for file sharing as far as using an application to do it. One is it keeps things off of your hard drive so that if anything ever happened to that hard drive, like a crash, you know, the file is still accessible. But it also allows you to do things from a collaboration standpoint other than emailing documents as an attachment. Many file sharing applications will allow for some version control so that you'll be able to see some of the updates that were done. They'll also allow you to manage and restrict access to files or permissions, which is very helpful when you have an organization that needs to access a group of files. And this slide is also about you know, the applications, but I wanted to have one slide that just really showed some examples of the more popular collaboration tools that we're seeing today. Because I think if you're in an environment where you maybe haven't been using a lot of collaboration tools, now that you've moved to a telework environment, you know, you're kind of almost forced into a situation where you need to find a way to do more conferencing, whether it's video or just teleconferencing or screen sharing and things like that. So on here, Cisco WebEx is a pretty popular program. It's been around for quite a long time and it's very good. One of the things to note about Cisco WebEx is that they do have a free offering, and I like to bring that up because if you haven't tried it, and I think most people have, a lot of people have been on a Cisco WebEx call. Sometimes training is done through WebEx. They do offer a free a program. It's for businesses. There were some limitations on it. It had a limitation of up to 50 participants in a call, and it also had a limitation of up to 40 minutes on a call. But with COVID-19, they've actually removed those restrictions. So it's a nice way right now, if you're thinking about trying Cisco WebEx, to go ahead and try that application and see if it works for your business. Google G Suite and Office 365. Those are two applications that really have a full suite of Office tools, and I think most people are familiar with Microsoft Word and Excel, and Google has similar products, with Google Sheets and Slides. But the reason why I think it's good to mention those tools is if you do have an Office 365 subscription, for example, you also most likely have access to Microsoft Teams, which is the collaboration tool. And then the same thing with Google G Suite with Google Meet. So it's good to take a look at what you have already, because if you're looking to start with a collaboration platform, if you already have something available to you, it means you wouldn't have to spend more to get something. And the last two on this list, Slack and Zoom, they've gotten a lot of popularity lately. And Slack's been around since about 2014, and Zoom's been around, I think, since about 2011. Slack has a little bit different take on collaboration to some extent. While they use a lot of the same concepts with collaboration, one thing that they really focus on is eliminating, their goal is to eliminate the need for email. And what they do is they process everything in what they call a channel. So if I had Slack and I was a project manager, what I might do is set up a channel for my project, and I would invite people to that channel. And the channel actually works a lot like a chat group. So anytime I had information about my project, I might put it out there. I could send a question out, I could type some information out, but also I could attach files. But everybody on my team would have one channel to go to see all the information. And then what would also happen there is this actually becomes a part of my company record or my project record. So if let's just say I had posted maybe a problem I was having, and somebody else chimed in, hey, have you tried this? And we could go back and forth and maybe resolve that issue through a Slack channel, through basically a text conversation. That would become part of the record of my project. And a few weeks from now, if that item came up again and I was wondering how did we resolve that, I could go right to the channel, do a search on it, and find it. And the reason why that they feel pretty strongly about this is it's quite a bit different from email, where really the email kind of comes in, it's time-based. So, and there's no organization to the subject necessarily. Of course, you could sort it, but you're constantly in a mode of sorting and sifting or looking through your email. Slack tries to address it in more of an organized manner. And it just quickly, Zoom, I think, has become very popular. It's got a very easy interface. It's intuitive. It also is a platform that was built on video first. So the video capability is really good, and they've done a good job being able to distribute video very efficiently. And I think because of that, it picked up popularity kind of quickly. And Slack and Zoom also do both have free offerings, if I hadn't mentioned that before. So now that we've talked about a bunch of the different products, usually the next question comes up, well, what product should I be using? And in order to maybe walk you through and help you make a good decision on what to use, one of the tools that we use as consultants is basically a technology assessment. In this case, we'll call it a Telework technology assessment. But really the first step is always to define your requirements. Think about what you do and what you need to accomplish, and how you want to use technology to help you with that. So a good thing to do is to start to think about who you're working with, what your workflows look like, and anywhere where there's an element there that's going to need technology to assist you to complete that work, that's a good place to, apply technology. And then we start to define that as a requirement. The next step would be to take a look at the technology that you already own or that you already have. Like I mentioned before, if you had an Office 365 subscription, you may want to take a look at what else comes with that. So there may be more products that you could use that you're not using today. But doing it in this manner, what you may be able to do is take a look at technologies that you already have today, so that you don't have to spend money on things on new things. So generally you could save money. You may minimize a learning curve because it's technology that people are already familiar with, and most likely it's going to be faster to implement because you don't have to buy anything. Now that being said, there's always some things that you can't cover with what you're doing today, and we call that basically a gap assessment. We take a look at what your requirements are, and now we've applied what technology you have today to those requirements, and there are some things that are not going to be covered, and that's your gap. So now for the last step, you want to take that gap, and that becomes a new set of requirements for you to go through and consider new technology that could solve those problems. And if you do it in that manner, you can be very focused when you look at your new technology to make sure it's going to do what you really need. Now, and here I was just thinking it might be helpful to share with you a couple of common problems that we see, and maybe how you can resolve them maybe before they even happen. But just a little bit of thought to home office setup. One thing that I highly recommend is investing in a headset. And really, if you get a good headset that has a microphone that has noise cancellation, really what it does is it cuts out a lot of your background noise. So a lot of times when you do use your PC, say a laptop, in order to to conduct a call, anytime you type or do anything with that, your audience is hearing all that typing, and it's a distraction. I also find with a really good noise canceling headset, other distractions around the home in a home office, they aren't heard. So it really helps with your communication. And then for video calls, a couple of things to think about. One is your lighting. So if you want to have the best appearance, you may want to do some tests and see see what the lighting looks like. Also, be conscientious of your background. I'll give you a quick example, but anything that the camera can see, basically your audience can see. So in my regular office, I actually have a whiteboard right in back of my desk, which is very handy. So if I am trying to, whiteboard out a solution to a problem for one of my clients, and then I get on a video call with another client, all of the stuff on the whiteboard would be available for them to see. So you just have to make sure that you're conscientious about what your background looks like. So nothing confidential, and also be conscientious of clutter or other things that the camera can pick up, mostly because it's just a distraction to people who are watching the video. They may be more focused on what's in the corner of your office than what you're trying to share with them. And just a quick note here, some of the applications, and one of them, Zoom in particular, actually has the ability to change your background, which puts you in a position where you wouldn't have to necessarily do anything with your office background. And then with technical glitches on the right side, not all technical glitches could be avoided, but if you do get familiar with your software, it'll make it a little bit easier and a little bit more comfortable for you to navigate through things. And one of the recommendations that I have is really to, at least as you get started, to just make it a habit of starting your conference calls a little bit early. Then you have the ability to make sure that your mic is working, you know how to mute on and mute off, you know how to perhaps screen share and do things like that, and work out all of those processes so that when you're actually live on the call, everything goes smooth. And lastly, for some recommendations, we believe that you should really look at this as kind of a long-term commitment. I know we were kind of thrown into this in a hurry, But if you take the time right now to get this set up right, it's really going to pay dividends in the long term. You know, the technologies that you use today, you're going to get people familiar with, so that if we have to go back to this, say for a business continuity reason, people will be familiar with it. It also provides flexibility for your workforce if it's needed. So we think it really makes sense to consider this a long-term commitment and make some decisions around it that will really help you in the future. And then as far as optimizing your remote work environment, you know, here again, getting familiar with your tools and understanding all the functions of and features of them, but even more so, figuring out how they can be helpful to your business and to your team, and figure out these things would start to become part of the culture of your team, how you use the tools. So that's a good way to kind of optimize, trying things out, seeing what works for you, and you know, don't waste time with the things that don't. And lastly, I always recommend, if possible, trying to develop a video culture. And Alham said it best earlier, that FaceTime builds relationships, and I really believe that. And with a video culture, I think there's a few things that happen that that you just don't see, you just are not tuned into in an audio call. Facial expression and body language. If you happen to notice somebody is trying to say something but they keep getting interrupted, you can perhaps give them the forum that they need to speak. You know, I think also too, that, you know, it keeps everybody more engaged because they know that they're on camera, and as a result of that, the meetings tend to move along quicker. Now, I know the culture is kind of a hard thing to do because we're not all actors and not familiar with having, you know, cameras on us. But if you can get to that point where you have a video culture, you'll find that it's actually quite fun. And when somebody shows up and they don't have their camera on, you're almost disappointed. So it's a good culture to drive to if you can. And with that, I'll turn it back to Sandy.
Okay, thank you, Drew, and thank you, Elham. We do have a few questions, and we have a few minutes to address some of those. One of the ones that we received was about communication strategies. The participant wanted to know what you recommend in terms of keeping your team informed and making people feel like they're not out there on their own. And so maybe both of you want to make a couple of comments with regard to response on that.
Sure, I'll take a stab at it first. I think what we want to be, you know, there's a balance between being helpful and over monitoring. So I think that it's like I mentioned in the presentation, it's good to have, you know, that once a week call or once a week assessment. I think that's really valuable. I think that you know, maybe in the earlier phases of working at home, I'm not sure where your organization is in terms of when you started. More correspondence is probably better in the beginning, and then later tapering off to a little bit less, so that you're not constantly in the employees' faces. But I think we all have to be understanding and know that we're dealing with, you know, what is a difficult situation for people as well. But, you know, I think calling, you know, the teleworker every hour is going to backfire. So, you know, I would say, you know, find the right balance and try to stick to that, and maybe do a little bit more upfront. Drew, you may want to add on the technology part.
Yeah, you know, from a technology perspective, you know, I think that the tools that are available, I mean, I do think video helps to you know, have a more I think that more comes through as far as caring and sincerity and making people feel, you know, less isolated. I think as far as mechanisms for just getting that message out, a lot of it, like what Elham just said, as far as the regularity of those messages. But with technology, you have a lot of different ways that you can get that out. You know, email is fine if you're you know, if you have a distribution of regular things and people are knowing that that they need to look for that. Also, just for short, you know, check-ins, you know, it's if you have the ability to chat, text chat, that is, you know, sometimes just a quick chat, you know, how are you doing, is sometimes helpful and insightful.
And I will share that we are teleworking. All of the county workforce basically that can is teleworking, and we've done a number of say coffees for a short time with others in the department. We've had some other informal gatherings that I think may help people feel like they're more connected. We're hoping at least that that's working that way. Another question that we got was about internet connections and people's home internet connections, and are there options if they're having difficulties with their home internet connections?
Sure, yeah. So yeah, there's a few things you could do. I think that, so everybody, you know, is kind of forced to use their home internet, and you know, a few things I think to consider with that. One is if you've had the same internet for quite a while, you know, if your internet modem is more than 5 years old, it's probably time to replace that technology. Many times, people who have you know, internet are actually renting the modem, that device, from their internet provider. So if you look at your internet bill and you see that you're paying basically rent on a modem and it's older, you could actually ask the internet provider to replace that for you. Sometimes getting newer technology will help make things stable and maybe even speed things up. The other thing to look at is your wireless router. Some of those modems actually also function as a router, and in some homes they don't. So there's a wireless router that's in addition to that device. And when you are setting up for a home environment, sometimes it's good to figure out where your signal is best. And a good way to do that is with a speed test. So just for a quick example, if you have a laptop and you're thinking about setting up where you're going to work and it's going to be in the kitchen, you know, you may want to take that laptop, put it in the kitchen and do a speed test. One of the speed tests I've used is speedtest.net, and it'll read back to you how fast your connection is, usually the download and then the upload. Download being really important for receiving that video. And what you can do is you could try that in a couple of areas in the house, and that may help you to figure out where is best to locate your office. Another trick, if it's possible, would be to move that wireless router closer to where you want to put your office, if it's possible. So those are a couple of strategies. I think another thing that I've actually used too is using my cell phone as a Wi-Fi hotspot. But whether you have an Apple or an Android, you should be able to go in, and if you have a smartphone with a data plan, you could actually turn a setting on that makes it a Wi-Fi hotspot, and you can use your laptop to get internet from that phone. And in a pinch, that may help you out as well.
Okay, thank you. And I've heard of these boosters and things like that as well. So I know those are available. So they may work for some people. And then I think for Elham, or an employee who's teleworking, they're not comfortable with them being independent. We're starting to run a little short on time. We have just a couple more questions to address. But Elham, if you want to take a crack at that one, if someone's not comfortable with the employee who is teleworking, what do they do as a manager?
Well, I think given the situation now, obviously there's no way to safeguard against that because, you know, probably a lot of the information workers are working at home, and especially non-essential workers. I would say that just keep in mind if someone's not independent, and it really means that as a manager, you probably have to do what we were talking about earlier, which is giving a lot more direction and being very clear about your expectations and reviewing them, that maybe at the end of the week, maybe too late. So maybe you have a midweek, you know, review of how the employee is doing to make sure that they are, you know, they're, you know, staying productive, and they know what they should. I mean, they have the right skill level. If they don't have the right skill level, then you may need to offer them some training to get them to that place.
Okay, and we also have a question, do employers sometimes pay for Wi-Fi?
All right, yeah, that's a good question. So as far as sometimes I think yes. I don't see there really being necessarily a common practice, but before COVID-19, there were generally two concepts for this. One was an employer who would make sure that their employees had all the tools, and the tools would be given to them by the employer. And in that case, they may pay for the Wi-Fi, or they may pay for a part of the Wi-Fi. They may be giving you a laptop to take home. You may have a company issued cell phone. The other option, or the other concept, which is becoming more popular, is something called bring your own device, or BYOD, which companies are looking at that in order to get around some of people who now have a work laptop and a personal laptop and a work phone and a personal phone. They've created a strategy where people could use their own personal devices, but there would be some requirements from a corporate perspective to either make sure that they were safe, such as that they should have passwords and things like that. So that there's kind of two takes on it, I guess. And so unfortunately, I think the answer is sometimes employers we see will provide like a stipend or something for using personal things for work.
Okay, well, we do have a couple other questions. We will try to post some of those along with, and there was a question I said in the beginning, but you may not have heard. We will be posting a recording of this webinar on our website, www.montgomerycountymd.gov/commute. But this last slide does also highlight the fact that next week we're going to be doing a telework webinar for employees. So those of you who are trying to manage and supervise the employees that you have, that might be something you'll want to have conveyed to your employees. They can sign up for that. We'll be sending out the information about that. And then also there are some resources that are listed here. And one of the things I want to stress is that the county is very interested to try to assist businesses of all types through this very challenging time. And there are resources available for businesses, and those are noted at the bottom. And I would urge you to go to the county's website frequently and check on what additional resources might become available. We'll be sending out, as I said in the beginning, a follow-up survey. We'd like to know what else you would like to know in order to help through this process. So be sure to get back to us on that, and you can reach out to us anytime. And we do have, as we've mentioned, free telework consulting services available to all of the county employers. And we have the professionals who have been on this call who are available. This is, of course, subject to a limitation of our funding, but we do have funds available right now. So if you need any further assistance to help set up or continue your telework program, please get in touch with us. We would be very happy to help you in any way that we can. If there are other things that you need, please connect with us. Thank you all for participating. And we look forward to hopefully having your employees participate next week. Thanks.